So yeah, we'll be talking about the new Form 4, which is Formlabs' newest resin printer. And I think a great way to kick this off is just by looking at this promotional video. It's a really good way to introduce the new Form 4 here.
Introducing Form 4. So fast, it will change the way you work. With most prints in under 2 hours. Iterate several times a day. With a proprietary release texture, flexible film tank, and ultra-high optical power. Produce parts that always fit, rivaling injection molding with 50 micron pixels, advanced pixel smoothing, and light touch supports. Achieve an unmatched print success rate with validated print settings, precision heating, force sensing, debris detection, and remote monitoring. Tackle any problem with industry-leading materials. With an upgraded mixer and dispense system that support highly viscous and filled resins. And do it all with a workflow anyone can learn in 15 minutes. With instant material changes, comprehensive software, and automated post-processing. Enter a new era of performance, built on our next-generation low-force display print engine, featuring a high-power backlight unit, light processing unit 4, release texture, and a flexible film tank, delivering extreme speed, reliability, and print quality. Now, anyone can perfect their products, keep production running, or improve patient care. The tool you've been waiting for, Form 4.
So yeah, really good overview there. So what I'd like to do is dive a little bit deeper into some of these new features and improvements with the Form 4. And I think a great way to kind of frame the perspective is by comparing some of these features with the previous generation printer, the Form 3 Plus. So for starters, let's look at the kind of print technology difference between these two machines. So with the Form 3 Plus, we were looking at a laser-based SLA printer. And with the Form 4, we're looking at what we call masked SLA or MSLA. So if we take a look at these kind of two simplified diagrams of these two machines, everything from the resin tank upward is basically all the same, at least just on the surface. But everything beneath the resin tank is pretty radically different between these two. So with the Form 3 Plus, it was a laser-based system of resin printing. So you had a laser that fired off, was reflected off like a series of mirrors, and then it passed up through the bottom of a clear resin tank, and it cured that layer. Now with the Form 4, because it's masked SLA, what we're referring to is there's an LCD screen. So you can kind of see that it's number 8 here. And that LCD screen has pixels that can turn on and off, and it can mask this light that's passing through it. And the light source is this big PCB that has a bunch of UV LEDs on it situated in an array. So you can see that a little bit more clearly here. And one thing I want to draw your attention to is this number 9 item, which says release texture. So if we take a look at this here, this is a pretty brilliant innovation from Formlabs. The LCD screen actually has kind of a rippled texture to it, kind of like a golf ball, if you will. And this is pretty significant because it has a pretty sizable impact on our peel forces. So if we look at a competitor's MSLA printer, usually one of these kind of hobbyist grade machines, you can see their LCD screen is totally smooth. So if we take a look at this from kind of a side view and a kind of simplified diagram here, you can see that the kind of rippled effect leaves these kind of voids between the tank film, that clear tank film that rests on top of it, and the actual LCD screen itself. Versus the hobbyist printer just has two smooth surfaces in contact with each other. And the reason this is important, this release texture is important with the Form 4, is because during the print process, when this build platform lifts up, when the layer has finished curing, it'll peel that layer up off the bottom of the tank. And you can see this tank film is kind of warping, right? It's kind of flexing during that peel process. And if we have two smooth surfaces in contact with each other, we can actually form like a suction in between those two objects. And this is analogous to, I don't know if you've ever seen this science experiment where if you place a piece of paper on a ruler and then like throw an object on the end of the ruler will not fly off. And the reason being is because that piece of paper and that flat table form that suction between each other. And so that paper is analogous to our tank film, and that smooth table is analogous to that very smooth LCD. So you can get those suction forces as a result. And so by implementing a release texture to the LCD on the Form 4, you get far lower peel forces than the hobbyist grade machines that have that smooth surface. Now the light source, as we saw with the Form 4, is an array of UV LEDs. And so kind of our control point is that LCD screen. And that LCD screen is a 4K LCD, and it has 50 micron pixels. Now before, with the Form 3, we had a laser that had an 85 micron spot diameter. So by controlling down to 50 micron pixel size, now we can obtain finer details. We have that smoother surface finish, and also better accuracy on that Form 4 there. Here you can really see the light processing unit differences in these rendered animations. So pretty incredible change of pace, and you get some great benefits with that mass version of SLA printing. Now it's pretty impossible to talk or not talk about build volume when a new printer gets released. So with the Form 4, you're looking at, instead of a 5.7 inch square build platform, the Form 4 you're looking at a more rectangular build platform. So you get extended dimension in the X, and you also get extended dimension in the Z axis. So if we take a look at our two wireframe representations of our build volumes and kind of piece them together, you can see kind of where you get that extended dimensions there. So 30% larger build volume as a result. Now, one of the party pieces with masked SLA printing is the enhanced speed that you get. So with Form 4, Formlabs has published that their average speed is about 40 millimeters per hour. So you're looking at 3.5 times faster speeds than what you got on the third generation of printer. And the reason you get faster speeds, I kind of threw together this little simplified animation using just some Lego plates here. But with the Form 3, you can see how we're having to use that laser to trace out the entire layer from left to right or right to left. But because we have a high-powered source of light and an LCD screen, we can very quickly draw out that cross-sectional area just by turning on and off the pixels. And we can cure an entire layer in just a matter of a few seconds because of that. So that's really where you get your, the majority of those speed improvements is through that different technology there. But looking at maybe a little bit more realistic case, so if you take this bracket piece on the Form 3 Plus, you place it on the build platform, you can see we can get 4 of these brackets on a single build. But with the Form 3, you're looking at a print time of about 12.5 hours, which means if you start that job when you get to work, it's not going to be done until the next day. By the time you get in the next day, it'll be ready. So that only means you're only going to be able to get 4 parts in a single workday. Now, if you take that same part and you place it on the Form 4 build platform, remember we get that larger volume with the Form 4, we can fit now 6 parts. So we get 2 extra parts now that we can fit. And because of the faster speeds, right, because we can cure entire layers at a single time, what that means is in a single workday, we can get 12 total parts. So we can get 2 of those builds. And then, because it's 12 total parts in 6 hours, right before we leave from work, we can get another build kicked off. So that means that within a single 24-hour day, we can get 18 total parts printed. So pretty tremendous, pretty incredible stuff. And if we look at that from like a weekly standpoint, you're going to see that, same level of throughput, much, much higher. Now, probably my favorite improvement with the Form 4 is some of the impacts that it has downstream. So we have a very high intensity light source with the Form 4. And what that means is that while we're printing, we are curing the part basically more effectively during the print process in the Form 4 over the Form 3. So what that means is that when we go to, after the part's finished washing, after it's finished drying, and we throw it into our cure oven, our cure process can be shorter. So we have a stronger green state part, cure process is shorter. So beforehand, we were looking at, with like a general purpose resin like gray, we were looking at like a 30-minute UV cure at 60 degrees Celsius. So there's a little bit of like a temperature ramp up and cool down kind of on either end of that 30 minutes. So maybe it was like closer to 40 minutes or 45 minutes in total. Now with the Form 4 and its general purpose resin, you're looking at a 5-minute UV cure, and that's occurring at room temperature. So there's actually no temperature ramp up or cool down cycle per Formlabs recommendations. So not only are you getting faster prints, but you're getting a faster cure process in addition, which is pretty incredible. The mixer with the Form 4 is no longer magnetically driven, now it's mechanically driven. So the mixer slots into an attachment point. That attachment point slides on a linear rail that's driven by a belt and a motor. And so if you are printing with like some of the more viscous materials, there's no longer a risk for like mixer decoupling. Also, the mixing process is extremely fast. It's another thing that contributes to the faster print times. And because it's mechanically driven, there are a couple of sensors that are built in that we'll take a look a little bit later and see what improvements result from that. A further improvement was with the resin tank. So unlike the Form 3, the Form 4's resin tank no longer has that black seal that runs around the internal perimeter. That black seal sometimes would experience degradation with some of the more caustic or abrasive, like high performance engineering resins. And so now, because that seal is no longer present, you get a more like uniform expected expiration across the entire suite of Formlabs resins. And that expiration is right about 75,000 layers. So for instance, if you have experience printing like rigid 10K on the Form 3 or the 3L, you know that when you load that material into the tank and insert the tank into the printer, you have 75 days of resin or 250 print hours before that tank expires. But with the Form 4, that tank has, again, that uniform expiration across all the materials. So about 75,000 layers, whether you're printing in 10K or Tough 2000 or Flexible ADA or any of the general purpose materials. So that's pretty great. Now, you may have seen from some of the previous slides where I had a comparison between, Form 3 versus Form 4, and maybe one had the V4 resin, the gray V4 versus gray V5. So the reason that's the case is with the release of the Form 4, Formlabs launched a whole suite of newest iterations of their general purpose materials. Now, when I talk about general purpose materials, I'm talking about gray, white, black, gray pro, clear, color, those materials. So Formlabs went and took those materials and updated them, improved their mechanical properties, and improve their aesthetic. So if you take a look at like gray V5, for instance, you can see, we have a number of engineering materials listed here. Gray V5 kind of sits, somewhere in between Tough 2000 and Rigid 4000 in terms of its mechanical properties. So now you're taking a material that's usually used for like, looks like, feels like prototypes, and because you've enhanced the mechanical properties, now you can kind of branch into some of the more functional applications with this material. Now, in kind of the legacy general purpose materials, Gray Pro was a very popular material from Formlabs because it took the mechanical properties of Gray V4 and enhance them, again, for branching out into some of the more functional applications. Now, with the newest release of Gray V5, V5 is like a hybrid of Gray Pro and Gray V4. And so if you look at this chart, you can see that Gray V5 has enhanced mechanical properties in every category over Gray Pro, except for heat deflection temperature. And even then, it's only by like about 10 degrees Fahrenheit. And another thing I want to draw your attention to is notice the price, notice the cost at that very last row item. You can see that Gray V5 is listed as $100 cheaper than Gray Pro and about $50 cheaper than Gray V4. So it's like not only did Formlabs create a material that is vastly improved over its predecessor, it's also being provided at a lower cost, which how many companies can you name that even do that? That's pretty incredible. Now, we talked about the mechanical property improvements. If we look at aesthetics, I think the clearest way, pun intended, you can see the aesthetic improvements is with clear V5. So, there's been aesthetics improvements with the gray, white, and black. They've made that kind of color a little bit richer, but with clear, it's the most apparent. So unlike clear V4, there's not as much issues with like yellowing that you see, post-cure. It's a much more optically clear material. So vast improvement there. Now, beyond just improvements with the resin, there's also been improvements with the resin cartridges. So the cartridges now are more of a square footprint rather than kind of the longer rectangular footprint. So you get a smaller form factor, which is great for those of you who may have like space restrictions. It uses 63% less plastic in the cartridge, so that helps contribute to the lower cost of the resin, as well as it helps with Formlabs' own like sustainability goals for the year. And at the bottom of the cartridge, there's been a redesign to the bite valve. So what that means is that it's now 5 to 10 times faster filling of your resin tank. And again, for those of you who are using some of the more viscous materials like rigid 10K, for instance, that's going to be a pretty significant improvement for you guys. Now, going over into some of the electronic features, there are 6 new intelligent systems that have been built into the Form 4. Those come in the form of various sensors and the way we're heating the resin, for instance, like force sensors, things like that, as well as like consumable detection. So now we're going to an RFID system. Before it was like spring fingers, and those could get maybe deformed, or there's some maintenance that might need to be looked after those. Now, because it's RFID, it's just a simple label. It's a simpler system, less moving parts, which probably is like the takeaway of this presentation. Form 4, just there's less moving parts, but it's more reliable and faster. It's an overall pretty massive upgrade. In terms of resin heating, so before with the Form 3, you're looking at kind of an indirect heating system. You're looking at air being warm air being blown over the top of the resin. Now with the Form 4, you have heating elements on either side of the LCD screen, and that heat is transferred directly into the bottom of the resin tank. And there are sensors that are applied to those heaters, as well as resin temperature sensors, to make sure that we're heating that resin exactly where it needs to be, so that we can get the most successful prints out of that as a result. In terms of determining how much resin is in the tank, before is more of an analog system. Now we incorporated the success of the level sense that we have in the Form 3L and brought it into the Form 4. So now it's all just signals that are being fired down into the resin to determine that resin level height. It's very successful for the Form 3L. It's a simpler system, and it's been incorporated successfully into the Form 4. So we looked at that resin level sensor just previously. We took a look at the resin temperature sensor and kind of how the Form 4 is heating that resin. In addition to that, there is a sensor that's built into the mixer. So I kind of hinted at this in that mixer section there. But because that mixer is mechanically driven, there's a sensor now that can determine if of any collisions. So if you were to have like a print failure and you had a bit of debris in that resin tank, when that mixer goes to mix from left to right, it can collide with that piece of debris and let the printer know that there's something going on, pause the print and notify you to come deal with it. In addition, there is a force sensor built into the Z-axis tower of the Form 4. That force sensor primarily is to detect the success of a peel force, or detect proper peel force, the proper peeling process there. And that's critical because obviously you want a successful peel that tells the printer if the print's going properly. Beyond that, it's also determining when the peel force has finished. So once that peel force finishes, the printer can then submerge that part back down into the resin tank and start the next layer. So again, we're kind of minimizing the amount of downtime between the end of a previous layer and the start of the next layer, which again contributes to the overall speed of the Form 4. Now, carried over from the Form 3 is the printer leveling sensor. So that sensing system is very similar to what it was on the Form 3. You have the same utility built in when you first fire up the printer for the very first time. You have that leveling disc and the 4 feet. So leveling that printer to make sure you're getting the good first layer as well as good subsequent layers. And lastly, you probably noticed this in that promotional video, maybe some of the images I've shared. There is a camera that is integrated into the build enclosure. So it is a 5 megapixel camera. Got some really good quality footage there. And this is primarily great for remote monitoring, right? If you have a really important job and you want to kind of keep an eye on it after hours, if it's printing overnight, being able to go in a dashboard and kind of look and make sure that the print is going okay is very valuable. And beforehand, we didn't have anything like that. And the camera also has some pretty cool new features built into it as well. We'll get into that in the Q&A here shortly. So those are the major benefits with the Form 4 printer. What I like to talk about is the 2nd generation wash. So this is the newest form wash that's been released with the Form 4. Because of the bigger build volume of the Form 4, Formlabs said, okay, we need a bigger wash to account for this bigger build volume. Not only did they account for a larger build volume, but they also added flexibility for varying solvent fills. And the 2nd generation wash is compatible with the Form 3 Plus and Form 4 build platforms. So in terms of the compatibility, you can really see this clearly with that image on the right. You can see that we have these kind of outer slots here. So these are for these arms where the build platform will rest on. So obviously the outer slots are for the larger x-axis of that Form 4 build platform. And the inner slots are for the kind of smaller build platform of that Form 3 Plus. Now you'll also notice that there are 3 tiers. So we have this top tier, we have an intermediary tier and a lower tier. So that lower tier is for lower solvent fills all the way up to your max solvent fill with that upper tier. And you can see that very clearly with the gradation lines that have been added to the solvent wash bucket. So we have a 7-liter minimum fill up to the 15-liter maximum fill. And the reason Formlabs did this is because some of our customers don't print parts that are very tall, especially like say dental customers. They're printing like dentures and mouth forms. These are obviously not very tall on the z-axis. So by being able to just fill your wash to only like 7 liters, you're not using as much solvent. It's less saturated solvent you're having to deal with when you go to replace it. So it just gives that ease of use and flexibility there. So at this point, what we'll do is we'll open the floor to questions. I've got some questions of my own. I'm sure you guys probably have some questions. Yeah, we'll go from there. And like Angie said, we got Chris Adams here from Formlabs, kind of help answer some of the more detailed questions for us. So Richard says, is the wash a must need or can we get by with just the printer?
Yeah, that's a good question, Richard. Thanks for asking one. So since we're doing inverted SLA style printing, we've got a tank of resin at the bottom of the printer, and then we're pulling the part up out of that tank resin one layer at a time. Because we're pulling the part up out of the tank, there's going to be some amount of surface resin stuck to the surface of the part. Think of, pulling a dish out of a sink full of water. There's still going to be some liquid on the part. Sort of the same concept, but it's resin on a part. So the wash gets all of that surface resin off of the part. The uncured resin doesn't have any structural properties to it, and then depending on the resin, it can sort of unqualify it as biocompatible. So we definitely recommend washing all the excess resin off of the part. If isopropyl alcohol itself is the issue, not just the washing step, but the recommended solvent, there are some alternatives to isopropyl alcohol that work really well. But in general, the wash is going to improve the look and feel and quality of your part. So definitely recommended.
Perfect. Now, what if a customer has wants to buy a Form 4, but they just have say like a first generation wash? Do they need to buy a Gen 2 wash, or what do they have to deal with there?
Yeah, you can wash your parts manually. We see that sometimes, but really, the Form 4 is a professional level machine, and the time and consistency that you'll get by washing it with an automated system is going to pay for itself. With most businesses, the time savings and being able to get a quality product consistently with less effort is really where the true value lies, and so that's why we recommend the automated wash. Would the resin end up just drying out if left out in the open air? So the resin itself doesn't cure under air. They're photopolymers, they'll cure under UV light. So if you were to take a part fresh off the printer and put it, say out in the sun, then that surface resin will cure, but it's going to run off of the part. And so it's where it sort of puddles is going to cure slower, but also add extra thickness to your part. And so the part that you're going to end up with might be over-cured or under-cured in some areas and dimensionally off in the other. If there's a specific reason, Richard, why you would consider not getting the form wash, I'd love to know a little bit more details. Maybe throw that into the Q&A about why the form wash is something that you're a little bit hesitant on.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen like a drop of resin, sitting on our mat for like weeks, and I'm like, oh, maybe it'll just go away. But no, it stays there forever. Unless you
It's not
cure
paint.
it.
It won't dry under regular indoor room conditions.
Now, one thing I wanted to ask you, Chris, with that clear V5, have you noticed that clear V5, just in your personal experience, is like a lot clearer than clear V4?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, Clear V4 was sort of setting a standard for clarity on resins in general. But with the Clear V5, I don't know the percentage off the top of my head. I think it's 30% higher optical transparency from Clear V4 to Clear V5.
Wow.
Plus the fact that the Form 4, like you mentioned in the content there, it puts out so much more power than the Form 3, and it's the highest amount of power delivery in its class across all companies, not just Formlabs. There really isn't any other print engine that can deliver that 16 milliwatts per square centimeter the way the Form 4 can. And so what that really leads to is when your clear part comes off the printer, it doesn't need the same post-curing that Clear V4 or clear resins on other platforms require. And it's that additional curing that can also reduce the optical transparency even further. And so it comes off clearer than anything that I've seen fresh off the machine, but then you factor in the fact that you're not going to get that additional yellowing during the post-cure. And it's certainly a game changer. We're already seeing some customers do things that are sort of just over the line of what could be achieved on Form 3 now with the new resin.
Wow. Something else.
Mm-hmm. I see Richard added some more context on the wash. So just the added cost. It's for a personal printer. Totally fair, Richard. One thing I would suggest then is still washing it, but maybe skipping the automated solution. So if this is something that you're going to be using for personal use, you can just do the washing with IPA. When we first launched with the Form 2, and we still have it on the Form 3 and the Form 4, but a manual wash kit. It's just essentially a tank that can handle IPA, and you can wash the parts in it manually. So if you're looking at just getting your hands on this, then really low cost way to do it if you're looking to avoid the form wash would be getting a container that can hold your parts in it, as well as say a gallon of IPA. Isopropyl alcohol is super cheap. You can get it off Amazon, and it'll last for lots and lots of printing, and then you can just agitate your part in the IPA. Or what we'll use if we're trying to do really delicate parts sometimes is use like a paintbrush with IPA to get into the nooks and crannies, and then let it air dry. And the isopropyl alcohol will evaporate under normal room conditions and pull off any last bit of that IPA with it. And then from there, the Form 4 parts don't necessarily require the post-cure. If you do, get the cure or just leave them out in the sun for a little bit, then you will get those higher mechanical properties.
Yeah, the question about the cure was one of mine. It looks like the Form 4, because of its intensity, is kind of reducing the need for that additional cure. Do you know if that's something that they're planning on doing, is making it to where you don't ever really need to do a post-cure, or is that still there's benefits to having that post-cure?
Yeah, I think there will always be benefits to having the post-cure. And I don't see us moving away from it anytime soon. Maybe sort of splitting it into a post-cured versus non-post-cured material standards. But a huge section of our customer base are designers and engineers and fabricators. Before the webinar started, you're talking about some of the heavy industry stuff that you're using printing for, and for customers like yourself or people in that real industrial space, mechanical properties is sort of the name of the game. And just by nature of the photopolymers, will always get better properties by exposing them to that extra UV energy post print. So no, I don't think we're going to get rid of the cure anytime soon. I think with things like fast model, we might start seeing customers just print high resolution prototypes really quickly, washing them, and then skipping the cure. But there'll still always be a big section of our customer base that wants the cure and those mechanical properties.
Gotcha. And Chris, would you mind? You mentioned fast model resin. I think that was one of the other new kind of V5 resins. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. Fast model resin is definitely top 3 of my favorite resins on the Form 4. So it is a remake of our draft resin on the Form 3. For anyone attending today that hasn't used the Form 3 or draft resin before, what draft was made for was customers that are looking to get a SLA quality prototype really quickly. And so draft was designed to print as fast as possible. And then with the scale up in hardware that we now have with the Form 4, fast model is incredibly fast. I should have brought it into the webinar booth that I'm in right now, but we have a brick. It's the full size of the Form 4 build volume. It's a big box that we use to put pamphlets and brochures in at trade shows. But it's the max horizontal, vertical, and height of a Form 4, and the entire print took an hour and 52 minutes. So fast model is just blazingly quick. Yeah, that's maximum build. Most of the builds on it are going to be 40 minutes to an hour. And so now if we're working on something in a workday, you can get 8 different prototypes done and have felt them all with your hand and found out where it needs to be modified or tweaked, and then print another one. So it's certainly lives up to the name fast model.
Very nice. Now, does fast model, is it have like a 5 minute cure process too? Is it something kind of right around there?
Yep, 5 minutes at room temperature,
Nice.
just to help lock in those mechanical properties.
Now, with the Form 4's launch, are there any like modifications that will be, I guess any like design modifications or any like orientation or support modifications that need to be done in preform?
No, not really. So there is a lot of changes that have to go in onto sort of the back end of things. How we're gonna cure each layer and peel each layer and support each layer changes because now instead of doing a laser spot at a time, we're doing an entire layer at once. So there's a bunch of changes that occur due to that, but all of that is taken care of with preform. So if you've got a build that you're already running on the Form 3 on preform, then you would just go under your print setup and change it from a Form 3 to a Form 4, add in a couple more parts to take advantage of the longer platform. It might regenerate the supports, but everything else is going to be taken care of for you.
Very nice. Yeah, I think I experienced that today. I was trying to find a good first print for the Form 4. We just got it set up after the trade show. And it was a part that I had already sliced for our Form 3L. And I imported it in. It was a form file already saved for that Form 3L. And yeah, I switched over to Form 4 in the job setup and selected Gray V5. And it said, hey, do you want to import supports for V5? And I said yes, and done. Like ready to send to the job, send to the printer. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's very much just a button click saying, oh, I'm printing on the Form 4 now, not the Form 3. And then everything else should be taken care of for you.
Yeah, I guess in that promotional video when that guy said, it can be learned in as quickly as 15 minutes, that preform definitely helps with that learning curve and kind of, making it a bit flatter, not quite as steep.
Yeah, yeah, remove as much of the guesswork as possible, and part of it is I got into 3D printing through the hobbyist FDM years ago, and you're always playing around with your different settings, your nozzle temperature, your bed temperature, and different speeds to try and get it fine-tuned. And we've got a huge amount of data. We do hundreds and hundreds of prints across multiple machines with all of our materials, so that our customers don't have to, and the settings are already there as soon as you boot the machine on.
Yeah, that's huge. Doing the legwork for the rest of us.
Yeah. We've got another question in the live chat here. How does fast model compare to black/clear resin as far as printing times? So fast model will be significantly quicker than both black and clear. Clear resin prints slightly faster than black resin. But that's just because black resin, as you saw in the slides, it's a much deeper, darker matte black than our black V4 resin. But, we'll remember third grade science, dark things absorb light. And so that does slow down the printing process just a little bit. So black V5 will print slightly slower than clear V5. But out of all three of those resins there, fast model will pass both of them. The percentage will depend a little bit. I don't want to throw just a random percentage out. But if you have a specific model, Richard, I would say definitely reach out. You can connect with myself or Joe or anyone else at the MLC team, MLC CAD team, and we'll take a model of your choosing and show you what that looks like in black resin, clear resin, and fast model, so you can see the time changes between them all.
Preform is free to download, right?
It is.
Slice up and test and see what that looks like.
Mm.
One thing I wanted to ask you, Chris, I kind of hinted at this in the presentation, but with that camera, I kind of talked about the remote monitoring probably being like one of the main reasons why, someone would be interested in having a camera on their 3D printer. But is there like other things you can do with that camera?
Yeah, we just rolled out our time-lapse feature. So it'll take a photo every couple layers of your part as it's rising up out of it. And so you get these really neat time lapses of your parts sort of just magic hatting out of a thin tank of resin at the bottom, but also the remote monitoring. It's also worth noting that if somebody's working in a classified data space, whether that be government or aerospace or any industry where remote monitoring or a camera is a no-go, then the camera has several levels of being disabled. So you can turn it off in software settings. There's cover that you can print and put on it. And then thirdly, you can just remove the camera altogether. And we've got some guides on that. So I like using it. I think the time-lapse feature is really cool. You get to see your parts just kind of emerge out of nothing. But for the customers where they can't have a camera within their workspace, there's a path forward for them.
Now, is there like a specific industry or like maybe a specific application where you're seeing the Form 4 like really will excel?
No, not really. That's a tough one to answer just because, as the manufacturers of machines that make things, we're kind of in a unique space where our customers are across a huge range of industries, everything from movie props to prototypes to tooling and jigs and fixtures, dental and medical customers, you name it, someone's probably using 3D printing in it. And so so that's sort of the beauty of additive manufacturing. We're across such a huge range of industries. And now that we've launched this new machine, it prints parts faster, that are stronger, look better, and cost less. And doesn't really matter what the industry is. If you reach out to a customer in any industry and you say, hey, do you want your parts stronger, faster, better, and cheaper? Nobody's going to say no to that. So there hasn't been a single industry yet that's really latched onto it too much more than others.
Yeah, I guess that's like asking an actor like where he gets his ideas from. You know what I mean? It's I know it's a very like general question, but it does show that like there's almost, yeah, like you said, no application or industry that isn't suited. I mean, even I've walked the line in some of these customers and I'm bound to see like at least a Form 2 in just about every place I go visit,
Yeah. Yeah, we've got close to 150,000 machines installed now, I believe, total worldwide.
Wow.
Yeah. And then
That's terrific.
well over 100 million parts printed. So, that's a lot of parts, and it's
Yeah.
across a huge amount of different industries.
I think I mentioned, or I saw something mentioned about faster changeover of materials. Is that, can you describe that process and how it maybe differs from the Form 3?
Yeah, for sure. So one key thing that we focused on while developing the Form 4 was the ease of use. I think we've got the largest material portfolio out of any 3D printing company. And we want our customers to be able to use different materials for different jobs. And so trying to make the machine easy to use and versatile, where you can just swap in and out different materials, was something that we're focused on. And so there's way less moving parts. We don't have to tension the tank anymore. The tank just clamps right into place. And so you've got these two latches on the side that clamp the tank down, make sure everything's properly tensioned. The tank film itself is tensioned during the manufacturing process. The machine doesn't have to do that anymore. And so now when it comes to swapping material, let's say your build platform is clean. You've got a dirty build platform, clean it in between resin, but you just snap the two handles and take out the tank of your first resin, say it's clear V5, put that onto your shelf or wherever it is that you're keeping your tanks when they're not in use, put in your fast model, snap that into place, and then the cartridge at the back just lifts out and plops in. And so our print farm here in Boston, we've got like north of 100 printers in one space. We do our marketing parts here, our custom sample parts here, huge amount of printing. We've got our consumables on hand. The amount of time it takes to switch from one material to the other is certainly under a minute.
Yeah, very nice. It already was pretty fast on the previous generation. But yeah, that's great.
I used to work in subtractive manufacturing where material change meant getting a buddy to help you lift off a 4x4 sheet of 1/2 inch aluminum and load on a sheet of some other material. And now it's you could do it on your own, no questions asked. It's pretty game changing for sure.
So we have another question from Richard here asking about multiple tanks. Are multiple tanks required for each resin type?
That's a good question. Definitely something that you're going to want to do. Yeah. So the resin tanks themselves on this new platform don't expire. It's really just a as used basis for tank life. So if you've got, let's say, a tank of clear V5, and you're using that for high optical transparency prints, and then you want to do something else in black resin, I would say get a second tank for those black resin. Trying to clean them in between is going to be a lot of work. Any amount of resin left in between the two will cause contamination in between the resin, and so now, your clear parts won't be clear the way that you want them to, or depending on the cure settings of the material, if it's two very different materials, say our elastic material and our rigid 10K, any cross contamination between those can hurt the print success. And so the sort of savings that you might get from not purchasing an extra tank will be swallowed up pretty quickly if you have any print failure, plus the lost time for it. So definitely get a tank for each material. The mixer wand is easier to clean and move in between. The mixer wand also has sort of an indefinite lifetime. So hope that answers your question, Richard. Awesome. Any other questions for me that you've got, Joe or Marcus?
I'll send you my address.
One thing I was going to ask you, Chris, was I know you guys have produced like documentation on the kind of the accuracy and the precision of some of your previous machines. Just like a white paper or something that you guys have available to customers and partners and all that. Will you guys do something similar for the Form 4, or is the dimensional accuracy maybe tight enough between the Form 4 and the Form 3? What do you see going on there?
Yes, that's a great question. Actually, that's something that came up a lot when we were trying to figure out where to position this machine, because a lot of customers were using the Form 3 over alternatives on the market because of the accuracy, and so we knew that was something that we couldn't move away from coming out with the Form 4. So the accuracy on the Form 4 is really unmatched. We've got some numbers for it on the Formlabs website that'll show what percentage of it was in, plus minus 50 microns or 0.5% of your overall part envelope.
Okay.
Yeah, and so it's actually improved. I don't know what the exact percentage is off the top of my head. I don't want to just throw a number out and mislead anyone, but it's on the website,
Okay.
and we can also follow up after.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I'll go and see if I can locate that. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and then for any attendees that are here, if you have a specific tolerance or accuracy metric that you need to hit for your application, or if you have a use case and you're wondering if there's material that can fit, what the parts look like, that sort of thing, then myself or Joe can definitely work with you to see what material makes the most sense for an application. Look over your parts or help you get those parts, print them and send them to you for your analysis. That way, before deciding if this machine is something that's going to fit with your workflow, you can actually get a part in hand, feel for yourself, test it for yourself, and make a fully informed decision.